and thank you very, very much for taking the time to come along to this launch today. My name is Jim Halley, for those of you who don't know me, this year's chairman of the Institute of Arbitrators. And before I say my few words, if I may introduce you to my colleagues here on my right. We have Richard Lee, who is the chairperson of the Court Alternative Mediation Services. He will be speaking to you following myself. Then we have David Doyle. Sorry, David Curran, my apologies. I get nervous at these things. And David will speak to you with respect to how the insurance industry might view this particular initiative. That will be followed by the Honourable Justice Michael Hurt. Again, he has done us the honour this evening of coming along to formally launch this particular initiative, and we're very, very grateful for that. And finally then, the chairman of the Mediation Coordinating Committees, Bill Holohan, will bring matters to an end this evening. So just by way of finding a place to start, if I can say that approximately this time last year, about 75 of our members accepted an invitation to come along to this very room, where our intention was to take a view of what we might consider we need to do as an organisation to meet the challenges with respect to our strategic focus over the next few years. And one of the initiatives proposed by Richard Lee was that we should attempt to put in place a court alternative mediation service. So at the time, that was an embryonic idea, and we worked through a process of trying to prove the concept, and Richard and his team worked very, very hard during the year to bring this idea to a reality, and we're deeply grateful to him and his special interest group that we're standing here approximately a year later about to launch the idea. So what I'm not going to do is talk too much about the idea itself. I'll leave Richard and his colleagues do that. But what I would like to do is to maybe try and put some context or some perspective on the initiative. And maybe first of all to start by saying that mediation as a concept is really, there's nothing new about it. In fact, it goes right back to recorded earlier times in Greece and Rome, when right back at the time of Socrates, the notion of mediation was a very popular and well-established concept. And what was interesting then was that there was an individual, or individuals, the educated class in the city-state of Athens were known as Sophists. And when a person needed to use the courts, they would go out and grab a Sophist who would come in and make their case for them. And to a very large extent, they were often pushed back out by their citizens, colleagues, to go out and try and find a way of resolving those disputes, rather than putting them to maybe, what have I done wrong here? Sorry. Back on. The philosophy lesson got a slight interruption. But they were often sent out by their jury peers to see could they resolve the issue themselves. And what was interesting was that juries would generally start with a group of 13 and go right up to 1,001. And obviously 1,001 would be used to resolve matters, serious matters of state. And maybe a jury of 13 would be engaged to resolve matters of a lot less importance. And what was interesting was that in the corner of a jury of 13, they had a vessel that would hold 13 litres of water, and it had a tap on it. and it would empty into an empty vessel that could hold 13 litres of water. And that was the time the Soffit got to speak on behalf of the person he was either prosecuting or defending. And right up to matters of state, they had a tank that could hold 1,001 litres of water, and it would empty into a tank could hold the same amount of water. And it was interesting that a rope divided the multitudes from the jury. And it is said, in one theory, it's the origin of the bar. It's still hard to get beyond that rope. It was interesting then that the number of issues that were referred back to the citizens to sort out themselves. So mediation as a concept goes right back to there. And there's many, many references to it in the works of Marcus Aurelius and other famous Roman generals and philosophers. So we've been living with the concept of mediation for time immemorial, and to a very large extent over the years it seems to have trafficked one way or the other, where different groups, I suppose, decided to become owners of it or gatekeepers of it. But we're now living in an age when another attempt is being made to broaden the concept out so that it's available to every person. And in this regard, the concept of court alternative mediation is just simply another initiative in that regard. What's unique or special about it is that the panel of mediators that we are establishing are competent, qualified mediators, accredited by the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and in some cases the Mediators Institute of Ireland. And what we've spent some time focusing on is the amount of work that they would have to do to be competent, capable and confident to be able to take on matters and resolve them through a neutral context and concept with maybe people they could be working with in the following weeks as colleagues, maybe in the bar or and working as solicitors or whatever. So essentially, it's simply what we've decided to do is to specialise and hone the skills that might be required for a particular brand of mediation, which is simply to be available when solicitors, barristers or judges refer cases to mediation. And to that extent, Richard and his colleagues and a lot of other members within the Institute have put a considerable amount of work into the particular aspect that we want to develop with you. I would hope that within a short number of months, possibly very early in the new year, we'll be standing here again introducing and launching our planning and environmental mediation special panel. And the focus of that particular group is to deal with matters concerning planning, concerning environmental issues, where again there is evidence to suggest that within a community one of the means of sorting some of these issues out is to empower the citizens themselves in a credible, respectable process to try and resolve their issues. That is not to say that one is implying or referring any criticism on any other system, but it's simply to enhance and broaden the concept of ADR. Equally beyond that, we would very early in the spring we will be launching our corporate and workplace mediation, which is a group that are already trained, specialised and ready to go. And a little bit beyond that, we will be launching our workplace investigation panel as well. So we have a lot of activities lined up over the next number of months, and your continued support is hugely important to them. But in particular, and coming back to today, you're all indeed very, very welcome to take time out of your busy working days. And if I may just end on, I started off on a philosophical link and I'll end on one. I remember a good few years ago working as an engineer, and one of the requests that was, or one of the instructions I got one day was to go to a pub in Parliament Street called the Red Hackle. The indication was that there had been an explosion there early January. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold on. And I was sent along to do a report on the particular event. So sorry. The Red Hackle was one of 4 pubs owned by a man called Dunn. And he also owned one called the Cutty Sark, further up the quays. He owned one in Baggett Street called the Crooked Bobby, and he owned one in Coolock called the Sheep of Wheat, and they were all named after schooners. So when I got to the one, the Red Hackle in Parliament Street, I was greeted with bits of carpet, plaster, broken furniture, everything that you would expect in a water-based explosion. And this were in the days when, you know, skips weren't as popular as they are now. So I met this little guy who reminded me of Andy Capp, going out with a wheelbarrow, and he was filling up this truck with broken furniture and bits of pictures and so on. And I noticed around the walls of the pub, particularly the lounge, that there was a selection of schooners, pictures, prints of old schooners. But in the snug, which just happened to be the only dry place worth standing in, was a big print that was referred to as the death of Socrates. And on this print, or in the print, there was this aged gentleman, bearded, drinking this chalice of hemlock, and surrounding the bed were all these various others in various states of upset, and hands on head and so on. So the old guy who was filling up the van, the lorry, was passing by, and he heard this young student from the insurance industry telling us that this was the death of Socrates. And this man at the end of the bed with the parchment was Plato, his pupil. And he was probably older looking than Socrates. So the old guy came in and he interrupted, and he said, "Son," he says, "I think you have that wrong." He said, "Plato was only 27 years of age when Socrates died. Sure, that fella hasn't a blade of hair on his head." So I hope that puts philosophy into the context that I wanted to start out at. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you on to Richard, who's going to talk to you in a little more depth about the Court Alternative Mediation Service. Thank you.